My name is Grace, and this is my story. I was 2 years old when I lost my parents, leaving me alone with no sibling or relative in this wicked world. Because my parents were defeated members of their church, one of the family in the church decided to take me in and raise me. It was going to be easy, right? Since it was a family in the church that took me in. But that was never the case. It was terrible. Right from when I was a child, I started receiving serious beating, and I would always cry out loud. Sometimes I stayed without eating any food. At the time I was 6, I was already doing the laundry, washing plates, and running important errands for the family. My foster mom always threatened to throw me out of her house if I dare complain to anyone. I was always looking very sad. After my primary school education, my foster family refused to sponsor my secondary school education, claiming they had no money, even though I was much more intelligent than their children. But what can I do? I had no one. I was lucky they even agreed to take me in the first place. Soon, I started going to their shop with them. I will wake up as early as 4 o'clock a.m. to do the house chores and leave the house by 7 a.m. because I had to open the store by 8 o'clock. For any little mistake I made, my foster parent would beat the hell out of me. They always refused to give me transportation, so I always trekked from the house to the store for 1 hour every day. Sometimes I would get starved for days, and soon it generated into me hawking inside the market. I would always hawk every blessed day, but I did not stop learning. Anytime I had an opportunity, I always studied with my friends. When I was 15, my foster father started acting strange towards me. He would always grab me from the back whenever I'm busy in the kitchen. I kept on asking him what he wanted, and he always replied that he wanted me. One day, I gave him a serious warning never to come close to me again, or I was going to tell everyone who cares to listen about him. He was angry, and he threatens to deal with me and make my life miserable. He kept his promise. He made my life a living hell. One day, I thought about my life and decided to leave the house for good. I just went quickly into my room, packed few clothes into my bag, stole some cash from my foster parent room, and I ran away. I was just walking on the road with no destination. I got to the park and I decided to board a bus going to the city. As I sat inside the bus looking through the window, I thought about the city. I've heard a lot of bad stories about the city, and I was really scared. As I got to the city, I began to walk around looking confused. I was able to sleep in one of the buses at the park that night. The next morning, I began to wander about again until God sent a good Samaritan, Mr. Charles, who helped me after listening to my story. He took me home to his family, and his wife kindly welcomed me. After I had freshened up, I ate with Mr. Charles' family. And after I've rested, Mr. Charles told me he had a friend that managed a restaurant. Probably I'll be able to get a job there. I thanked Mrs. Charles and bidded her farewell. I got to meet the manager through the help of Mr. Charles, and I was given the job. The job even had an accommodation for their staffs, so I was really excited. I started working and I was loved by everyone, including my colleague. One day, Mrs. Charles suggested I use my day off to learn a skill since I was no longer interested in furthering my education. At least I have to have a skill to fall back on later in the future. I agreed, and soon I started my apprenticeship as a fashion designer since I had passion for fashion. 5 years later, I was already a professional. At that time, I had saved enough money to rent my own apartment. With the help of Mr. Charles, I was able to secure a decent apartment. One day, I decided to quit working in the restaurant and focus on my fashion. My colleagues were sad to see me leave. I got a new sewing machine and I used part of my house as a workspace. Sooner than expected, I got a big shop for my brand. I began to train students that came to learn. My brand grew rapidly, and in a space of 2 years, I had accomplished a lot. One beautiful Sunday after church service, I met the love of my life, Samuel. Samuel was an usher in my church. He told me he had been watching me since I joined the church, and I just summoned courage to approach me now. I smiled and I also introduced myself to him. He was pleased and happy. He was an handsome man, and I felt very good that someone like Samuel was interested in me. We started talking, and soon we became very close. We enjoyed each other's company. Soon our pastor became aware of our relationship, and he happily approved. We kept on talking and getting to know each other. 3 months later, Samuel proposed, and I happily accepted. This was like a dream come true. I told Mr. and Mrs. Charles. They were so happy for me. On the day of my wedding, I cried. I remember my years in my hometown. Who would have thought I'll be living a fulfilled life now? I had a flourishing business and a good husband. Mr. Charles walked me down the altar as my father. It was also a moment of joy for him, remembering how he took me from the streets, and 7 years later, we were celebrating a great marriage. I got married to the love of my life. We both resumed our various businesses after our honeymoon. Samuel was a businessman. He had stores where he sells electrical parts and was doing well for himself. Months later, I became pregnant and we were both happy. Soon, Samuel suggested I stop working at the moment and focus on my health. I told him I was fine, but he insisted. Since I had capable workers, I accepted his suggestion and everyone understood. At the 9th month, I had a beautiful baby boy. Everyone was happy for me. After 5 months, I told my husband I was ready to resume my business, but he declined. He insisted that the family needed me more and suggested I close down the business for now. After much consideration, because I wanted to be a good and kind wife to my husband, I accepted. I closed down my business to become an housewife, even against Mr. and Mrs. Charles' wish. They felt it was not right, but that was what my husband wanted and I had to obey. My husband was a kind man. He kept on providing and taking care of me and my son. Soon I became pregnant again for my second child. By this time, my husband had already started to borrow my savings without returning them. Soon I became broke with no savings, totally dependent on my husband. That was when his true colors started showing. My husband started complaining about everything I do. He stopped providing my needs and he was always using harsh words on me. I became worried. This man has changed. What went wrong? I became very unhappy and depressed. My husband started to come home late. Some days he will not come home at all, and he won't bother to let me know. In fact, he started having affairs. He will even call his girlfriends in my presence. I will cry and cry. He stopped my communication with everyone I knew. He isolated me completely, broke my SIM card and got a new one for me. We moved to another part of the city and he warned me against making new friends. He rendered me handicapped, deleted all my social media accounts, and I became a shadow of myself. Yet, after having my second baby, I got pregnant for the third child. I was not feeling well. I was looking tattered. I had no one to talk to. He goes to the market himself to buy the things he thinks is needed for the house, so that I won't have a dime. I kept on asking him my offense, so that I can apologize and change. But he refused to say anything. 7 years into the marriage, no one will be able to recognize me. I was looking horrible and shabby, and he will still insult my look after putting me through this condition. I cried every day, for I was sad, but for the sake of my children, I decided to stay strong. One day, my husband called to tell me that one of his girlfriends just gave birth. Soon, I will be seeing less of him at home because he will be staying with her. I did not care anymore. He was not useful to me anyway. I just nodded my head in affirmation. The annoying part was that we still go to our new church together, and you will see him worshiping and lifting up his hands as if he was the most holiest man. Everyone in the church loved and admired him. They will always tell me how blessed I was to have someone like him. and I would just smile. He made sure I always dress well to church on Sundays so that no one will start asking questions, and also threatening me not to say anything to anyone. I did not even have energy, so I was quiet. One day he came back home angry and beat the hell out of me for no reason, giving me bruises and swollen face. I could not take it any longer. The next day, I went to see one of my neighbors and begged her to lend me some money, and she already did. I took my children and went in search of Mr. and Mrs. Charles. I had lost contact with them for years. I went to their house and I was told they had moved. But luckily, someone was able to help me with their current address. Mrs. Charles was shocked when she saw me. She broke down in tears. She hugged me and asked me why I was looking this way. I just cried and she understood. Mr. Charles came. He was so angry at my husband. He vowed he was going to make him pay. Does he think you do not have anyone to fight for you? I was really emotional. This was the family I abandoned for a beast. Mr. Charles said I was not going back to the house. It would be over his dead body. At first I was scared, but later I summoned courage and stayed. The next day my husband started calling me. I told him I was with my parents. He started shouting over the phone, warning me to come back if I did not want to see his wrath. To be honest, I was afraid, but my mom and my sister refused. They stood their ground and encouraged me. The next day, my husband got their address and came by himself to see me. And my parents told him I was no longer interested in a marriage. He laughed and asked me, "How will you survive? Do you have money? Better come back home. I will forgive you for this foolish act." I was really angry at this time. How did I ever tolerate everything this man did to me? I spat at his face and told him I was done. "I am divorcing you. Stay out of my life for good." When he saw I was serious, he bent his head in shame and started to plead with me, promising me he would change. But it was too late already. I was done. My mom and sister made sure I got separated and divorced him. I even got custody of my children. After I got separated, I resumed my sewing again, and this time I came out bigger, better, and stronger than before. Thanks to my amazing adopted parents and family, I'm now living my dream life. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.